God's chosen ones. God is revealing everything to you. Listen, vertical bar, divine, wake up. Are you tired of feeling like God has forgotten your name? Have you been praying into what feels like empty silence, wondering if heaven even hears you anymore? Do you lie awake at 3 a.m. asking yourself why everyone else seems to be walking in their breakthrough while you're still waiting in the shadows? Stop, right there. What if I told you that your spiritual restlessness isn't abandonment, it's an invitation? What if the very isolation you've been enduring was God clearing the room so He could speak to you without interference? You, not the person sitting next to you, not the thousands watching this right now. You. God pressed pause on all of heaven just to download something directly into your spirit in this exact moment. And if your heart is racing right now, if something deep in your chest feels like it's awakening, that's not coincidence. That's confirmation. Listen carefully. You didn't stumble across this message. You were summoned here. There's a divine appointment happening right now between your soul and eternity, and what's about to be revealed will shatter every lie you've believed about your purpose, your timing, and your worth. The whisper that's been trying to wake you while the world still sleeps, it's getting louder. That restless stirring in your spirit that you can't quite name, it's about to find its voice. Right now, as you're reading these words, your fingertips might be trembling slightly. That's not anxiety, that's alignment. Your spirit recognizes what your mind hasn't caught up to yet. This is the moment everything changes. For months, maybe years, you felt like you're living in spiritual static, seeing glimpses of your calling through fog, hearing muffled instructions through thick walls. But today, God is turning up the volume, the veil is lifting. The clarity you've been desperately seeking is about to flood your consciousness like morning light piercing through prison walls. And I want to pause here to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through super thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let heaven know you're ready. Because here's what's happening. God is about to reveal everything, not in riddles, not in whispers you have to strain to hear, but with the kind of crystal clear divine intelligence that makes the past make sense, the present come alive, and the future ignite with holy fire. If your heart feels like it's pounding without reason, that's your confirmation. Type 777 in the comments right now. Declare your readiness. Let heaven know you're awake, you're aware, and you're ready to receive what's been sealed with your name on it. Heaven is watching. Your breakthrough is speaking. And you, chosen one, are about to remember exactly who you've always been. Stay with me. What comes next will change everything. Do you remember lying in bed at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling, feeling like God had turned His back on you? Have you ever felt so spiritually invisible that you wondered if your prayers were even making it past your bedroom walls? What if I told you that those exact moments, the ones that felt like abandonment, were actually God's most intimate classroom? Listen to me carefully, chosen one. What you interpreted as rejection was redirection. What felt like delay was divine development happening in disguise. Every season that broke your heart was breaking open something unshakable inside you. You see, there's a lie that's been whispering in your ear for years. If God really loved you, life wouldn't be this hard. But here's the truth that will shatter that deception forever. God doesn't protect His chosen ones from the fire. He protects them in the fire. Because ordinary people are shaped by comfort, but extraordinary destiny is forged in the furnace. Think about David. Before he ever wore a crown, he lived in caves. Before he ruled a nation, he ran for his life. 1 Samuel tells us he was hunted like a wild animal by the very king he once served. But here's what the enemy didn't understand. Every night David spent hiding in those caves, God was carving the heart of a king inside him. The isolation wasn't punishment, it was preparation. Do you remember the nights you cried a lone note from pain, but from feeling completely invisible? Those weren't wasted tears. They were the very moments God was downloading wisdom into your spirit that you couldn't have received any other way. Because some revelations can only be born in solitude. Some strength can only be discovered in silence. Elijah knew this truth. After his greatest victory against the prophets of Baal, he found himself under a tree, begging God to take his life. One moment he's calling down fire from heaven, the next he's running scared into the wilderness. But God didn't rebuke him. Instead, he fed him, let him sleep, and then whispered the most important words Elijah would ever hear. "What are you doing here?" That question wasn't condemnation, it was invitation. God was saying, "Now that the noise has died down, now that the crowd has gone home, let me show you what I've really been preparing you for. Your wilderness wasn't a mistake. Your isolation wasn't abandonment. God was clearing the room so he could speak to you without interference. Because the message he's been trying to download into your spirit is too sacred for shallow ground, too powerful for unprepared hearts." Moses understood this. 40 years in Pharaoh's palace couldn't prepare him for what God was calling him to do. It took 40 years in the desert, 40 years of silence, obscurity, and seeming irrelevance before God could trust him with the assignment to deliver an entire nation. What looked like career suicide was actually divine preparation. What felt like exile was actually education in the secret school of the Almighty. And you've been enrolled in that same school. Every door that slammed shut wasn't God saying no. It was God saying, "Not yet. You're not ready for that room because I'm preparing you for a much bigger one." Every relationship that fell apart wasn't God abandoning you to loneliness. It was God removing counterfeits so your heart would recognize the real thing when it arrived. What hurt you didn't kill you, because it was never meant to. It was meant to reveal what can't be broken inside you. Every betrayal showed you that your security doesn't come from people. Every financial struggle taught you that your provision flows from heaven, not earth. Every season of confusion forced you to develop the one thing that matters most, the ability to hear God's voice above every other sound. Right now, as I'm speaking these words, something is shifting in your spirit. You're starting to see the pattern, aren't you? You're beginning to understand that what you called your greatest failures were actually your most important assignments. The job you lost led you to discover gifts you didn't know you had. The relationship that ended made room for a love that actually sees you. The dream that died was buried so something infinitely better could resurrect. This is why your story doesn't look like anyone else's. Read. This is why your timeline doesn't match your friends' timelines. You weren't forgotten, you were being formed, shaped in secret, prepared in private, trained in silence for an assignment that requires someone who's learned to hear God's whisper above the world's roar. Jeremiah 1-5 declares, "Before I formed you in the womb I knew you. Before you were born I set you apart." God didn't just know you were coming, he designed your entire journey, including every detour, every delay, every disappointment. Because he wasn't just making you a believer, he was making you a warrior. Not just a survivor, but an overcomer. Not just someone with a testimony, but someone with an anointing. Can you feel it happening right now? That recognition stirring in your chest? That's not emotion, that's revelation. Your spirit is finally understanding what your mind couldn't process. Nothing was random, nothing was wasted. Every tear was an investment. Every trial was training. Every season of silence was sacred preparation for the sound you're about to make. But here's what's about to shake you to your core. formation is complete. The preparation is over. What God has been building in you in secret is about to be revealed in public. And the very people who counted you out are about to witness the power that was hidden in your pain. The atmosphere around you is changing. Can you feel it? That electric stillness in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. Heaven's veil is thinning and your spirit knows it. You see, for years you've been walking through life feeling like you're catching glimpses of something just beyond your reach. Fragments of truth floating past your consciousness like whispers in a crowded room. You'd sense things before they happened, feel tension in conversations that seemed perfectly normal to everyone else, experience that strange knowing in your gut that something wasn't right even when you couldn't explain why. And what did people tell you? You're too sensitive. You're overthinking. You're being paranoid. But here's what they didn't understand. You weren't imagining things. You were perceiving them. The same spirit that revealed hidden truths to Daniel in Babylon, that showed Ezekiel visions of heaven's throne room, that whispered secrets to John on the island of Patmos, that same spirit has been fine-tuning your spiritual antenna. 1 Corinthians 2:10 tells us plainly, "The Spirit searches all things, even the deep things of God." You're not just sensing more now, you're seeing more because God is trusting you with truth. Think about it. When did this heightened awareness really start intensifying? Was it during your darkest season? When everything you thought you could count on crumbled? When the people you trusted most walked away without explanation? Here's the revelation that's going to shift everything for you. That wasn't abandonment, that was preparation. God had to isolate you from the noise so you could finally hear Him clearly. He had to remove the voices that were drowning out His whisper. You see, spiritual discernment isn't developed in the crowd, it's cultivated in the quiet. It's not learned through lectures, it's forged through loneliness. Jesus Himself withdrew to lonely places to pray. Luke 5:16. Even the Son of God needed solitude to maintain His spiritual clarity. What makes you think your isolation was punishment when it was actually promotion? That's why some people left you. Not rejection, protection from distortion. God was creating sacred space around you because what He was about to download into your spirit was too precious to be contaminated by doubt, too powerful to be diluted by skepticism, too holy to be mocked by those who walk by sight instead of faith. And now, right now, you're beginning to understand why you see what others miss, why you feel what others ignore, why conversations that seem harmless to everyone else leave you feeling spiritually disturbed. Your discernment isn't a curse, it's a calling card. You walk into rooms and instantly know the spiritual temperature. You hear people speak and recognize the spirit behind their words. You sense shifts in the atmosphere before storms even form. This isn't coincidence. This is commissioning. Remember Elisha's servant in 2 Kings 6? He panicked when he saw the enemy army surrounding them. But Elisha prayed, "Open his eyes so he may see." And suddenly the servant saw what had been there all along the hills, full of horses and chariots of fire. The supernatural had always been present. He just needed spiritual sight to perceive it. That's exactly what's happening to you. Your spiritual eyes are opening. The supernatural realm that was always there is becoming visible to you. And with that, sight comes responsibility. You can no longer pretend you don't see what God is showing you. You can't go back to being spiritually blind now that the scales have fallen from your eyes. When God reveals truth to you, it's not information, it's transformation. It's not just knowledge, it's a call to action. And here's what's going to separate you from the crowd moving forward. While others are still debating whether God speaks today, you're learning to recognize His voice in real time. While they're questioning if supernatural discernment is real, you're walking in it daily. While they're wondering if prophecy still exists, you're living it. But let me warn you, this new level of spiritual sight comes with a cost. You'll start noticing things about people that make you uncomfortable. You'll sense deception behind smiles. You'll feel spiritual heaviness in places others find entertaining. You'll recognize manipulation in conversations others think are innocent. And the enemy will whisper, "You're being judgmental. You're being critical. You're losing your compassion." Don't you believe it for 1 second. Discernment isn't judgment, it's protection. Spiritual sensitivity isn't criticism, it's clarity. When God shows you the truth about people and situations, He's not making you harsh, He's keeping you safe. Proverbs 27:14 warns us, "The simple believe anything, but the prudent give thought to their steps." You're not simple anymore, you're prudent. You think before you step because you can see the traps others miss. This is your spiritual graduation moment. You're moving from spiritual infancy to spiritual maturity, from drinking milk to eating meat, from being tossed around by every wind of doctrine to being anchored in unshakable truth. The veil isn't just lifting around you, it's lifting within you. And what you're discovering is that you were never meant to walk through life spiritually blind. You were created to see, to know, to discern, to perceive truth at levels that confound the wise and reveal the mysteries of the kingdom. Say it with me, if this resonates with your spirit, I will not ignore what heaven is revealing. Comment that declaration right now. Make it official. Let heaven know you're ready to walk in the fullness of what God is showing you. Because what comes next isn't just going to open your eyes wider, it's going to open doors you never knew existed. Here's what's going to shake you to your core, dear chosen one. Every single season you thought was random, every heartbreak that left you questioning God's love, every door that slammed shut when you were inches away from walking through, none of it was accident. It was all blueprint. You've been living inside a divine pattern. And today, right now, the code is being cracked wide open. Think about it. When did your spiritual sensitivity first awaken? Was it during your greatest triumph? Or was it in the ashes of what felt like your greatest defeat? When did you first hear God's voice with crystal clarity? Was it on the mountaintop of success? Or was it in the valley where you thought He had abandoned you completely? You felt like you were losing everything. But what if heaven was pruning the fruitless branches so the real fruit could finally grow? Let me take you back to Naomi. Remember her story in the book of Ruth? She lost her husband, both her sons died, and she was left with nothing but 2 foreign daughters-in-law in a land that offered her zero security. She literally changed her name to Mara, which means bitter. She told people, "Don't call me Naomi anymore, call me bitter, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter." But here's the divine loop you need to see. That wilderness season wasn't God punishing Naomi, it was God positioning her for a legacy that would reach Jesus Christ Himself. Through Ruth's loyalty, forged in that very suffering, Naomi became part of the bloodline of the Messiah. Her bitter season was actually sacred preparation. Are you starting to see the pattern? Now look at your own story with fresh eyes. That season, when you felt completely forgotten, when was it? 3 years ago? 5? 10? What happened immediately after that wilderness period? Did opportunities start appearing that you never could have imagined? Did your discernment sharpen in ways that now protect you daily? Did your compassion deepen to levels that now allow you to reach hearts others can't touch? You are not behind schedule. You are on holy time. Joseph understood this divine loop better than anyone. Genesis 50-20, he looked his brothers straight in the eyes, the same brothers who threw him in a pit and sold him into slavery, and said, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." The betrayal wasn't the detour. The betrayal was the route to the palace. But here's where it gets personal for you. Right now, in 2024, How many times have you felt betrayed by people you trusted? How many times have you wondered why God allowed certain people to walk out of your life just when you needed them most? How many times have you questioned why the very people you poured into turned around and wounded you? What if those departures weren't rejections? What if they were redirections? What if God was removing voices that would have talked you out of your destiny? What if He was clearing the room of influences that would have kept you playing small when He needed you to step into something massive? Let me tell you about Selah. She's not in the Bible, but her story could be. 2 years ago, Selah's fiancé left her 3 weeks before their wedding. The man she thought was her God-given partner just vanished. She spiraled into depression so deep she couldn't leave her apartment for weeks. She felt like God had played the cruelest joke on her heart. But in that isolation, something extraordinary happened. Selah started journaling her prayers, and those prayers began sounding less like questions and more like prophecy. She began having dreams so vivid they felt like divine downloads. One morning she read Jeremiah 33:3, "Call to me, and I will answer you, and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." That verse didn't just comfort her, it ignited her. Today, Selah runs a ministry that has restored thousands of women from heartbreak to purpose. The very pain that nearly destroyed her became the authority that now heals others. Her broken engagement wasn't God's cruelty, was His mercy, protecting her from a union that would have silenced the voice the world desperately needed to hear. Do you see the loop now? Do you see how heaven operates? Your greatest wound became your greatest weapon. Your deepest valley became your highest platform. Your most confusing season became your clearest calling. Every tear you cried in secret was watering seeds you couldn't see. Every night you wondered if God still remembered your name. He was actually engraving it on His palms. Every moment you felt forgotten, you were being prepared for something so significant that only suffering could forge you strong enough to carry it. This is the divine loop. What breaks you, makes you. What wounds you, anoints you. What confuses you, commissions you. And here's the revelation that's going to change everything for you moving forward. You're not just recognizing this pattern now, you're being prepared to step into the next loop, the next level of divine disruption that will position you for the next level of divine influence. The restlessness you've been feeling lately, that's not dissatisfaction, that's anticipation. Heaven is stirring again. The same God who orchestrated every seeming setback to become a setup is moving in your life right now, preparing the next chapter that will make everything else make sense. But here's the question that will determine your next 10 years. Are you going to trust the pattern, or are you going to resist it when the next wave of divine disruption begins? Because it's coming, chosen one. The signs are already manifesting around you. You know what's remarkable about this moment? While millions of people are scrolling through their phones right now, numbing themselves with distractions, fighting to stay asleep in a world that's screaming for awakening, you're here. You're listening. Your spirit has been stirring for months, maybe years, and today you finally understand why. That restlessness, you've carried that feeling like you're living in the wrong frequency while everyone around you seems content with shallow conversations and surface-level living that wasn't your burden. That was your calling trying to break through. You've been the one in family gatherings who felt the spiritual weight in the room before anyone else spoke. You've been the one who could sense when someone was hiding pain behind their smile. You've been the one who felt God's presence so strongly during worship that you wondered if others thought you were too much. Here's what I need you to understand. You're not crazy, you're called. For decades, maybe your entire adult life, you've carried this spiritual tension. This awareness that there's more happening beneath the surface of ordinary conversations, ordinary relationships, ordinary days. You felt like you were living with one foot in the natural world and one foot in the eternal realm. and society told you to tone it down. Churches told you to be more practical. Family members suggested you were being too sensitive. But what if I told you that spiritual tension you've carried for all these years wasn't your weakness, it was your discernment waking up? What if every time you felt too spiritual for the room, God was actually preparing you to bring heaven into rooms that had forgotten what holy felt like? The Bible tells us in 1 Corinthians 2:14 that the person without the Spirit does not accept the things that come from the Spirit of God, but considers them foolishness. You've lived this verse. You've experienced the loneliness of carrying spiritual insight in a world that calls wisdom weird. But here's the revelation that's going to shift everything for you. The fog didn't lift for everyone. It lifted for you. While others are content living in spiritual autopilot, God chose you to see clearly. While others chased temporary comfort, He awakened in you the hunger for eternal truth. While others are satisfied with Sunday morning religion, He planted in your chest the fire of 24/7 spiritual awareness. You were never meant to walk asleep in a world that needed your light. Think about Moses at the burning bush. The scripture says in Exodus 3-4 that when the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush. Moses could have kept walking. He could have dismissed what he saw as imagination, but he turned aside to investigate, and that's when God spoke. You've been turning aside your whole life. You've been the one who notices what others overlook. You've been the one who feels the spiritual atmosphere shift when you walk into certain places. You've been the one who receives dreams that feel more real than your waking hours. And I know there have been times when you questioned your own perceptions, times when you wondered if you were reading too much into situations, being too spiritual, seeing things that weren't really there. But what if your sensitivity wasn't a flaw? What if it was your assignment? What if God has been training your spiritual senses all these years because He knew this generation would need people who could discern truth from deception, who could recognize His voice above the noise, who could stand firm when everything around them was shifting? You've been in training. Every time you felt that check in your spirit about a person or situation, that was God developing your discernment. Every time you sensed His presence in a quiet moment, that was Him fine-tuning your spiritual frequency. Every time you felt called to pray for someone without knowing why, that was Him activating your intercessory anointing. The prophet Samuel was just a boy when God first called his name in the temple. At first, he didn't recognize the voice. He ran to Eli, thinking the old priest had called him. But Eli finally understood what was happening and told Samuel, "Go and lie down, and if he calls you, say, 'Speak, Lord, for your servant is listening.'" And when Samuel responded that way, everything changed. You're in your Samuel moment right now. You've been hearing the voice, but maybe not recognizing it. You've been feeling the stirring, but perhaps dismissing it. But today, right now, God is saying, "Speak, because your servant is finally ready to listen with full surrender." If you've ever felt too spiritual for the room, too sensitive for the noise, too aware for your own good, drop an eye emoji below. Let's awaken the others. Let them know they're not alone in carrying this sacred burden. Because here's what's about to happen. You're going to stop apologizing for your spiritual sensitivity. You're going to stop dimming your light to make others comfortable. You're going to embrace the truth that your restless spirit wasn't a problem to be solved. It was a calling to be answered. The world told you to blend in, but God created you to stand out. The world told you to quiet your spirit, but God gave you that spirit to be a voice. The world told you to stop being so intense about spiritual things, but God made you intense because this generation needs someone who won't compromise truth for comfort. Your awakening isn't just personal, it's prophetic. But here's where everything shifts, chosen one. You thought this was just about you receiving revelation. You thought God was simply opening your eyes so you could see more clearly. But what if I told you something that will shake you to your core? You were never just a witness to what God is doing. You were never meant to be a passive observer of divine truth. You, dear friend, you are the signal. Let that penetrate your spirit for a moment. Every single revelation that's been flooding your consciousness, every piece of clarity that's been downloaded into your soul, it wasn't given to you just so you could feel better about your circumstances. It was given to you because God is activating something through you that this world desperately needs. Do you remember what Jesus told his disciples in Matthew 5:14? You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. Not you will be the light. Not you might become the light. You are the light. Right now, today, in this very moment. And here's the sobering truth that most believers never grasp. God is not just talking to you anymore. He's activating through you. Every whisper you've been hearing, every vision that's been stirring in your dreams, every inexplicable knowing that rises in your chest, that's not just personal enlightenment, that's commissioning. You see, there's a reason why the isolation felt so intense before this awakening. There's a reason why you had to walk through seasons where nobody understood you, where your voice felt silenced, where your gift seemed buried under pain and disappointment. God wasn't punishing you, He was preparing you. Because what you carry now, this depth of spiritual insight, this ability to discern truth from deception, this unshakable knowing that comes from having wrestled with God in the dark places, this cannot be taught in seminaries or downloaded from self-help books. This can only be forged in the furnace of authentic surrender. Think about Moses, 40 years in the wilderness, leading sheep before God called him from the burning bush. 40 years of feeling forgotten, overlooked, disqualified by his past failures. But when God was ready to deliver an entire nation, He didn't call someone who had been sitting in comfort. He called the man who had been broken and rebuilt in solitude. You're not just being shown your path anymore. You're being shown why others couldn't walk it. You're understanding now why the road had to be so difficult, why the preparation period stretched so long, why you had to be refined to this precise degree of spiritual sensitivity. And now comes the weight of it all. Now comes the responsibility that will either make you or break you. Because when God reveals truth to you at this level, you can no longer live as if you don't know what you know. You can no longer shrink back into comfortable obscurity. You can no longer play small when heaven has entrusted you with something massive. Listen to me carefully. The very fact that you can sense spiritual atmospheres now, that you can feel the undercurrents in conversations, that you can discern people's hearts before they even speak, that's not a gift for your personal comfort. That's a tool for kingdom advancement. When Daniel received visions that troubled him, that kept him awake at night, God wasn't just entertaining him with prophetic glimpses. Daniel was being prepared to stand before kings, to interpret the impossible, to carry divine wisdom into the highest levels of earthly authority. Daniel 2:47 records King Nebuchadnezzar's response. Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries. You carry that same anointing now. You carry the ability to reveal mysteries, to bring heaven's perspective into impossible situations, to speak life into dead places. But with great revelation comes great responsibility. Here's what's happening in your spirit right now, and this might terrify you. You're losing the ability to tolerate spiritual mediocrity. You can't sit in services where there's no presence anymore. You can't engage in conversations that lack depth. You can't pretend to be satisfied with surface-level Christianity when you've tasted the depths of God's counsel. This isn't spiritual pride. This is spiritual maturity. You've been ruined for the ordinary because you've been called to the extraordinary. And that calling, it's not optional anymore. But here's where most people stumble. They receive revelation and then spend years trying to convince others to validate what God has shown them. They waste precious time seeking approval for assignments that were never meant to be understood by the masses. Stop. Right there. You don't need human validation for divine commissioning. When God activates you, the activation itself is the authority. When He downloads strategy into your spirit, that download carries its own power to manifest. The question burning in heaven right now is this: will you step into the fullness of what's been revealed to you, or will you spend another decade shrinking back from the very purpose that's been calling your name? I need you to pause this video right now. Get a pen, get a piece of paper, and write these words down. I will no longer shrink from what God has revealed to me. Write it down. And then I want you to stand up, look directly into whatever device you're watching this on, and declare those words out loud. Do it now. Because what comes next requires you to stop being a secret agent for the kingdom and start walking in the open authority of someone who has been commissioned by the Most High God. Your activation has begun, and the world will never be the same because of what God is about to release through you. But are you ready for the weight of carrying fire? Chosen one, something supernatural is happening right now, and it's not just around you, it's because of you. You've spent years apologizing for taking up space, dimming your light so others wouldn't feel uncomfortable, shrinking your voice because someone once told you that you were too much. But what if I told you that your presence was never meant to be negotiable? What if your very existence in certain rooms was a divine assignment? Listen to me carefully. You are no longer the person who walks into spaces hoping to blend in. The moment God opened your spiritual eyes, the moment revelation flooded your consciousness, you became something the atmosphere cannot ignore. Your presence is now a trumpet blast into dry places. Think about young Samuel in the temple. 1 Samuel chapter 3 tells us he was just a boy, lying quietly in the house of the Lord when God's voice cut through the silence. Samuel, Samuel. But here's what most people miss when Samuel finally answered, "Speak, for your servant is listening." Everything in that temple shifted. The presence of God didn't just visit Samuel, it inhabited that space because Samuel was ready to receive it. You are Samuel in this moment. God has been calling your name through every trial, every delay, every season of confusion. And now that you've finally answered, "Speak, Lord," the very air around you is electrified with divine possibility. Have you noticed how people respond to you differently now? How conversations change when you enter the room? How some people suddenly become nervous in your presence while others are inexplicably drawn to you? That's not coincidence. That's the anointing on your life becoming visible. Your friend's Aurora understood this. She was a successful executive, climbing the corporate ladder, living the American dream on paper. But deep in her spirit, she felt a persistent nudge: leave the boardroom, work with children in underserved communities. It made no logical sense. Her salary would drop by 80%. Her colleagues called her crazy. But Aurora followed that divine whisper, and within 2 years, she was leading an educational initiative that transformed an entire region. She didn't lose her influence, she multiplied it. But here's the shocking truth most believers never grasp. God never meant for your gifts to be silenced. He didn't hide them because they weren't good enough. He concealed them until the appointed time, until you were mature enough to handle the weight of His glory without it crushing your character. Tyler Perry knows this intimately. Before he became one of the most powerful voices in entertainment, he was homeless, sleeping in his car, rejected by every studio in Hollywood. But he said yes to his calling before anyone else believed in his vision. He wrote plays in a tiny apartment, staged them in small venues, and kept saying yes to what God was revealing in his spirit. Today, he owns one of the largest independent film studios in America. His presence didn't just change his circumstances, it shifted an entire industry. What if your breakthrough isn't about you finally getting what you deserve? What if it's about the world finally getting what it needs, which is the authentic, unfiltered, spiritually awakened version of you? You see, the enemy's greatest fear isn't that you'll become successful. His terror is that you'll become yourself. Because when you walk in the fullness of who God created you to be, you don't just change, you become a catalyst for change in everyone around you. Your presence is no longer negotiable, it's assignable. God is positioning you in rooms where your voice will carry weight, your discernment will save lives, your prayers will shift atmospheres. You don't have to chase what aligns with your purpose, it's magnetized to your frequency now. But let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. Are you still playing small because you're afraid of how bright your light actually is? Are you still whispering when God called you to roar? Are you still asking permission to be who heaven already confirmed you are? Because here's what's happening in the spirit realm. Right now, angels are being dispatched to remove every obstacle that has kept you from your divine assignment. Doors that have been locked for years are beginning to creak open. People who have the resources you need are receiving dreams about someone who fits your exact description. But this level of favor comes with a sobering reality. You can no longer live carelessly. Every word you speak now carries creative power. Every decision you make ripples through the spiritual atmosphere. Every room you enter will either be lifted or challenged by your presence. Proverbs 18:16 tells us, "A gift opens the way and ushers the giver into the presence of the great." Your gifts aren't ornaments, they're keys. Keys to rooms you've never imagined walking into. Keys to conversations that will reshape your future. Keys to influence that will outlive your lifetime. Samuel didn't stay a boy in the temple. He became the prophet who anointed kings. Aurora didn't remain an executive. She became a voice for the voiceless. Tyler didn't stay homeless. He became a kingdom builder. And you're not staying where you are. The room is shifting because you walked in. And what you do next will determine whether that shift becomes a gentle adjustment or a seismic transformation that echoes through eternity. So tell me, chosen Ani, are you ready to stop apologizing for the earthquake God placed in your spirit? Listen closely, chosen one. What I'm about to share will shatter everything you thought you knew about your spiritual journey. There's a room in heaven with your name carved into the doorframe, not written, carved, etched deep into eternal wood by the finger of God himself before you took your first breath on earth. And tonight, that door just swung wide open. You feel it, don't you? That electric sensation running down your spine right now. That's not adrenaline, that's divine recognition. Your spirit knows what your mind is still catching up to. You've been granted access to places in the spirit realm that most people will never see. But here's what will shock you. You were never locked out of this room. You were being held back for divine security clearance. Think about the dreams you've had lately. The ones that felt too real to be just dreams. The ones where you woke up with tears on your cheeks and a knowing in your bones that something eternal had just touched you. Those weren't random firings of your subconscious. Those were heaven's knock on your spirit. In Jeremiah 33:3, God says, "Call to me and I will answer you and tell you great and unsearchable things you do not know." That verse isn't poetry, it's a password. And you've been whispering it in your prayers for months, haven't you? Every time you felt that sudden spiritual nudge to check your phone and found exactly the message you needed. Every time you turned to a random page in your Bible and the words seemed to glow with personal meaning. Every moment you knew something before anyone told you that wasn't intuition. That was intelligence from the throne room. You see, there's something happening in the spirit realm right now that most believers aren't even aware of. God is opening his record room to specific individuals, people who've proven they can handle sacred information without becoming proud. People who've walked through fire and emerged with soft hearts instead of hard attitudes. And you, dear one, you're on that list. The tears you've cried in secret. They've been archived as spiritual currency in heaven's vaults. Every midnight prayer when you thought nobody was listening, recorded with precision in golden scrolls. Every moment you chose faith over fear when everything around you was falling apart, documented as evidence of your readiness for deeper revelation. Psalm 56:8 tells us, God keeps our tears in a bottle and records them in his book. But what if I told you those tears weren't just remembered, they were invested? What if every drop of sorrow you've shed has been building compound spiritual interest, and the payout is about to be released? Look around your life right now. Do you see cracks of light breaking through what once seemed like solid walls of limitation? That light isn't metaphorical. That's literal heaven pressing through the fabric of your ordinary existence. Your promotion at work that came out of nowhere, that crack of light. The relationship that healed when you'd given up hope, another crack. The financial provision that showed up just when you needed it most. Heaven breaking through again. But here's what's about to devastate your understanding of how God operates. These weren't separate miracles, they were previews. Trailers for the main feature that's about to begin in your life. In that secret room with your name on it, there are blueprints for your next decade, strategies for battles you haven't faced yet, connections with people you haven't met, resources for assignments you can't even imagine. And the combination to unlock it all, it's the sound of your surrendered yes. Not the yes you say when things are easy, the yes you whisper when everything in your flesh is screaming no. The yes that costs you comfort, but purchases you destiny. Daniel knew about this room. When he prayed toward Jerusalem 3 times a day despite the king's decree, he wasn't just being religious, he was maintaining his security clearance for heavenly intelligence. And because he never broke protocol, God showed him the rise and fall of empires that wouldn't exist for centuries. Ezekiel saw the wheel within the wheel, the glory of God that transported him beyond human understanding. But notice these men weren't living easy lives when revelation came. They were under pressure, in exile, facing impossible circumstances. Sound familiar? The isolation you've endured wasn't punishment, it was preparation. God has been clearing your spiritual atmosphere, removing the voices that would distort what he's about to download into your consciousness. Every person who walked away from you took a piece of confusion with them. Every door that closed removed a distraction. Every disappointment removed an illusion. You've been wondering why you feel so different lately, haven't you? Why conversations that used to engage you now feel empty? Why entertainment that used to capture your attention now seems trivial? Why you crave solitude more than social media? That's not depression. That's divine elevation. Your spiritual frequency is being adjusted to receive transmissions from higher realms. And tonight, the adjustment is complete. If you've ever had a dream you can't explain, a vision that felt more real than reality, a moment where you knew something you had no way of knowing, comment, I remember the room. That memory wasn't random. It was heaven's knock, and now the door is opening. But I need you to understand something crucial. With access comes accountability. What you're about to receive isn't just for your blessing, it's for your assignment. The question is, are you ready to step into a room where the temperature is holiness and the air is thick with divine purpose? Listen to me very carefully, chosen one. That rejection you felt, that isolation that cut so deep you thought you'd never recover, the way people seem to turn away from you just when you needed them most. You've been looking at it all wrong. You weren't the black sheep, you were the marked one. You weren't being punished, you were being sharpened. And that silence you've been carrying like a burden, that wasn't weakness, that was your weapon being forged in secret. Hell never fights what's not a threat. Did you hear me? Hell never wastes ammunition on empty targets. So when the attacks intensified against your mind, your relationships, your peace, when everything seemed to fall apart just as you were getting closer to God, that wasn't coincidence. That was confirmation. You were dangerous to darkness, and darkness knew it before you did. Think about it. Why do you think David was hunted by King Saul before he ever wore a crown? 1 Samuel 18:12 tells us, Saul was afraid of David because the Lord was with David but had departed from Saul. Saul didn't fear David's resume. He feared David's anointing. The very presence of God on that young shepherd's life made the king tremble in his palace. Your silence was a sword. Your stillness was a strategy. While others were making noise, God was making you. While they were building platforms, He was building your character. While they were collecting followers, He was teaching you to follow Him alone. You were isolated, but not invisible. You were quiet, but not forgotten. You were hidden, but never abandoned. Do you understand what's been happening? Every door that slammed shut wasn't rejection, it was redirection. Every relationship that ended wasn't failure, it was divine filtration. Every season of silence wasn't God ignoring you, it was God isolating you from the voices that would have contaminated what He was downloading into your spirit. The enemy knew something about you that you're just now beginning to remember. You carry kingdom DNA. There's something in your bloodline, something in your calling, something in the very fiber of your being that makes demons nervous and principalities panic. That's why you were attacked more. Not because you were weak, but because you were noticed. Think about Moses. Pharaoh didn't order the death of Hebrew baby girls. Exodus 1:16 says he targeted the boys because he knew deliverance was coming through a male lineage. The enemy always attacks what threatens his kingdom. And chosen one, you've been threatening his kingdom since the day you drew breath. Your very existence is an act of warfare. Your prayers shake atmospheric strongholds. Your worship breaks generational curses. Your presence alone shifts spiritual climates. That's why the opposition has been so fierce. That's why the battles felt so personal. Because they were. You weren't fighting for survival. You were fighting for assignment. And every weapon formed against you only proved what hell already knew: you're too dangerous to ignore. Remember Jeremiah? God told him in chapter 1, verse 5, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart." But look what happened. Next, immediate opposition. His own family turned against him. The priests wanted him dead. The king burned his prophecies. Why? Because his words carried the power to topple kingdoms. Your words carry that same power. Your life carries that same threat to darkness. That's why you've been under such intense spiritual pressure. The enemy has been trying to silence you before you fully awaken to who you are. But here's what he didn't count on. Isolation made you stronger. Rejection made you purer. Silence made you more sensitive to heaven's frequency. Every attack only activated more of your spiritual DNA. Every betrayal only burned away what wasn't supposed to stay anyway. You were isolated, but not invisible. You were quiet, but not forgotten. You were hidden, but never abandoned. And now, after years of wondering if God had forgotten your address, after seasons of feeling like you were speaking into the void, after nights of questioning whether your prayers even made it past the ceiling, you're starting to feel it, aren't you? That stirring, that awakening, that holy fire beginning to burn in your chest. The warrior that hell has been afraid of is finally waking up. Do you know why Gideon was hiding in a winepress when the angel found him? Judges 6:11 says he was threshing wheat in secret because he was afraid of the Midianites. But the angel didn't see a fearful farmer. He saw a mighty warrior. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior," the angel declared. Gideon looked around confused. "Mighty warrior? Me? But God saw what Gideon couldn't see: Yeth's true identity. Chosen one, as we reach the end of this sacred encounter, I want you to carry these truths with you, like treasures locked in your heart. You were never forgotten. Every moment of silence was God preparing your ears to hear His voice more clearly. Every season of isolation was Him clearing the room so you could receive what was meant for you alone. Every battle you faced was evidence that hell recognized your threat level long before you understood your own power. Remember this: your sensitivity isn't weakness, it's spiritual intelligence. Your discernment isn't paranoia, it's divine protection. Your journey through the wilderness wasn't punishment. It was preparation for the promised land that's opening before you right now. You are not walking this path alone. Even when it feels like you're the only one who sees what you see, who feels what you feel, who carries what you carry, there's an entire community of chosen ones walking this same sacred road. Some are steps ahead, reaching back to pull you forward. Others are just behind you, drawing strength from your courage to keep pressing on. And above all, remember that the God who called you from your mother's womb, the God who numbered every hair on your head, the God who knew your name before the foundation of the world, He is still working in your life. He's not finished with your story. In fact, the chapters He's writing right now will be the ones that make all the previous pain make perfect sense. I want to thank every single person who has stayed with us through this entire journey. Your attention isn't just valuable, it's sacred. The fact that you're here proves that God is stirring something deep within your spirit. If this message has touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You're part of a family now, a community of awakened souls who understand that God is still speaking to His chosen ones. But before you go, I need to ask you something that will determine everything about how you walk forward from this moment. Are you ready to stop hiding from your calling and start walking in the fullness of who God created you to be? Let me leave you with this prayer, and I want you to receive it as if I'm standing right there with you, my hand on your shoulder, speaking these words directly over your life. Father God, I lift up every precious soul who has heard this message tonight. Lord, you know their names, you know their struggles, you know the battles they've fought in secret, the tears they've cried when no one was watching, the prayers they've whispered when hope felt distant. Right now, I pray that your divine revelation would continue to unfold in their lives. Open their spiritual eyes wider than they've ever been opened. Sharpen their discernment until they can distinguish between your voice and every other voice trying to speak into their lives. God, heal their hearts from the wounds of rejection. Replace every lie the enemy has whispered with your truth. Where they've felt overlooked, let them feel your intentional love. Where they've felt abandoned, let them sense your faithful presence. Where they've felt purposeless, ignite their calling like fire in their bones. Break every chain that has held them back. Shatter every ceiling that has kept them small. Silence every voice that has made them doubt their worth. And release them into the fullness of their destiny with confidence, clarity, and unshakable faith. Surround them with divine connections, people who will recognize their gifts, celebrate their growth, and stand with them in the battles ahead. Give them supernatural favor that opens doors no man can shut. Provide for every need according to your riches in glory. And Lord, let them really know that they are not alone. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever. You are with them always, even to the end of the age. In Jesus' mighty name, amen. Now, I want to hear from you. In the comments below, tell me, what truth from tonight hit your heart the deepest? What's one thing God is revealing to you about your identity or your calling? Your testimony might be exactly what someone else needs to hear to take their own next step. And if this message stirred something in your spirit, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs to know they're not crazy, they're not alone, and they're not forgotten. Sometimes we're the answer to someone else's prayer for a sign that God still speaks. Remember, beloved, you're not just chosen, you're awakened. You're not just called, you're commissioned. You're not just surviving, you're thriving. And your greatest days aren't behind you, they're ahead of you. Keep listening, keep believing, keep walking in the light of His revelation. Until we meet again, may the God of all grace, all wisdom, and all revelation continue to speak to you in ways that leave no doubt you are His, you are seen, and you are loved beyond measure. God bless you richly, chosen one. Your awakening has only just begun.